Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! A similar story I saw recently reminded me of this. It happened in 2015, so pre-pandemic. The day before Easter, my wife and I helped our kids make colored eggs. Some we dyed, some we painted, and others were just plastic with candy. But my kids doodled little faces on them for fun. On Easter morning, my wife and I went to my parents' house because they live on the edge of the city, right next to some woods. And they have got a good 2-acre property with a few scattered apple trees, a garden, a play structure for the kids, my dad hand-built, and some decent-sized bushes. Perfect for hiding eggs in. We spent a good hour in the morning placing the eggs in clever but also easy to find places for the kids. We also invited a friend of my wife who was a single mom with a little girl to join in, and she was overjoyed we invited her. We took a little break to have a coffee and chat after hiding the eggs, as we planned to go out looking for them at noon since it was a little chilly that morning. But my mom suddenly came to us and said there was a lady with kids she'd never seen before hunting for the eggs in the backyard, and her kids were using the baskets we'd set aside for our own egg hunt. They had been left sitting by the garden for when the hunt was to start, and those thieving little brats just took them without a care. I told my wife to pull out her phone and start recording just in case. My wife and I have both dealt with entitled people long before seeing stories on Reddit, so having video evidence can really help. We then went outside and I demanded to know just what the hell this woman was thinking. The Karen mom was startled when I called out to her, but then got mad at us when I told her to put the eggs back, as she was not invited. Since this was 7 years ago, I'll have to paraphrase most of it as my memory can be pretty garbage at times. Hey, what do you think you're doing here? This is a private property.
God, don't sneak up on me. What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with me? You're trespassing on private property and letting your kids steal our eggs. By this point, her two brats had run to hide behind her, and they were plowing raspberries at me. Give those eggs back. They aren't yours.
What's wrong with you? They are just little kids. I couldn't afford to give them a good Easter this year, and when we saw all the eggs you were hiding, I just thought maybe you could share. Besides, they aren't just eggs. Go to the store and get more, huh?
My family lovingly colored and painted those eggs all day yesterday, and you will give them back, or so help me. And then the Karen actually slapped me across the face and stomped on my foot at the same time. I got bullied a fair bit as a kid, so it didn't faze me nearly as much as she thought. Plus, she couldn't stomp or hit very hard at all. So all that just made me angrier. And I'm pretty sure she realized she badly effed up, because well, she just started backing away. Last chance. Return the eggs now.
No! My babies got them first.
I was done with this crap and turned to tell my family to just call the police. The Karen started shouting at me that we can't call the police over some stupid eggs, and my dad then went and plugged the side gate, which is how the Karen had gotten in. We don't know how she was spying on us since she wasn't even a neighbor to my parents. But when we refused to let her leave, she started screaming hysterically that we were illegally detaining her. The police arrived in about 10 minutes, and by then the Karen had huddled with her kids on the bench by the garden. My wife showed the cops the video of the Karen slapping me, and they quickly told her she was under arrest and forced her kids to give back the eggs and baskets. The Karen started screaming that it wasn't fair and that she just wanted a happy Easter for her kids. Her little brats didn't make things easy for the police either, as they tried to hit them for arresting their mom. We made a few statements and the police carted off the Karen and her family. Then we re-hid all of the eggs, which took longer because we had double-checked any places we'd already hidden eggs to see if they weren't there. The kids were all super upset that someone tried to steal their eggs too, and it took some work to calm them down, but they all still got their Easter egg hunt, and all was well. Karen, though, more or less got off easy. She pleaded guilty and got only a month in jail and a fine. And during court I found out from her soon-to-be ex-husband that they were in the middle of a divorce that Karen had been intentionally dragging out. After court we didn't see or hear from any of them again, but I'd like to think that the situation gave the dad the edge he needed in a divorce. And it's become a funny story we like to share with people once in a while. This is my first post, so I hope this fits here. I'm a full-time single dad to a 3-year-old. She has been going to the same daycare center for the last 2.5 years and not once has anything like this happened. We arrived very early to daycare, usually a few minutes before it opens, because I work early. We usually wait outside quietly for the doors to open. About a month ago, a new child we will call Devil Child was registered at daycare. The mother, we will call her Devil Mom, also worked early and showed up usually about the same time my daughter and I do. I warmly greet her as Devil Mom and kid walk up to the locked door, which I may add is up a small set of 7 concrete steps. I get a cold look as if it's a crime to say hello. The Devil Child is relatively well behaved the first day, waiting for the daycare to open. The next morning we arrive and sure enough, the mother and the kid are waiting. The kid sees the door is locked and is furiously pulling on a door handle to want the door to unlock. My daughter and I are at the bottom of the steps because she wanted to look at some new blooming purple flowers I did not recognize in the small garden out front of the daycare. The kid's hands slip off the door handle and he starts stumbling towards the steps. Dad mode activate. I leap over my daughter who's crouched looking at the flower and I reach out to stop him from falling down the stairs, catching him with one hand and pushing him back up on the top landing. Enter the Devil Mom's fury. The Devil Kid stumbled a little as I pushed him back up to the top of the stairs and scraped his knee in the concrete.
Oh my god, honey bun, are you okay? Mommy, that man hurt me. My knee hurts. Crying loudly, clearly faking it. How dare you hurt my son? You should be ashamed. How can you beat up a little kid?
Really? Would you rather have your son smash his head on the steps and end up in the hospital? I essentially just saved your son's life. You should be a little grateful, I would think. My head began to race with thoughts like, is this dummy serious?
Are you threatening my son?
What?
Don't ever come near me or my son again. Do you understand?
I was pretty upset as I dropped my daughter off and went to work. Next day, I arrived at the same usual time, but this time my daughter and I waited by the car. The Devil Kid is once again pulling like heck on a door. The Devil Mom is on her phone. I stand and watch this kid as my daughter sits on the grass minding her own business. The kid hand slip. This time I am too far to help, and even if I was close enough, I was told I couldn't. His mother didn't see him slip, and she couldn't react in time when she did. I watched breathlessly as a kid tumbled down the steps. Luckily, this time the kid fell in a kind of sideways roll down the steps, and thankfully he didn't hit his head. I called an ambulance and about 5 minutes later an ambulance arrived as well as 2 police cars. Where I live, if paramedics were called to tend to a minor, police are automatically dispatched. The cops asked for a statement and I gave them one and went off to work. A week went by before I heard anything about the Devil Mom and her kid. I arrived like usual one morning to find a man I've never seen before. He asked me, "Hi, are you the guy who called the ambulance last week for a little boy?" "Yes, I am." "Is there a problem?" "No, actually, I came to say thank you for trying to save my son. We are grateful." And his mother apologizes for how she spoke to you. She was arrested that day because, well, she was negligent and wasn't paying attention. Turns out the kid had broken 3 ribs, his left forearm, and got several pretty substantial bruises and is in a temporary care of his grandparents because he's not allowed to be around the mother. I will update if new information comes. If there is anything to learn from this, is don't tell someone trying to save your child and put away your phone. Talking to my grandmother earlier today reminded me of a story from a number of years ago. I live in Sydney and used to fly up to the Gold Coast 3 or 4 times a year to check on my grandmother. The whole family was in Sydney, so someone would usually pop up once each month to help her out. Anyway, I would always rent a car from Hertz when I arrived. At the time, they offered a prepaid fuel option where you would pay an amount and not need to refuel before return. It was usually less than you would pay at the local service station, so I usually took this option. As I picked up the keys to this shiny, new manual Toyota Corolla, the woman said to me, "So you have the prepaid fuel, just bring it back empty." After a few days of relaxing by the beach, I ran a few errands for my grandmother in the morning before my 3 p.m. flight when the fuel light comes on and the words of Hertz staff ring in my ear. Bring it back empty. Not wanting to push it, I pulled into 7-Eleven and put 2 liters in. I went on my way. The light didn't extinguish, but with the distance I needed to cover, I figured I'll be safe. About 1 p.m. my grandmother is pushing me out the door telling me to catch my flight, so I make the 6-kilometer trip to the airport. The whole time anxiously wondering if I'll make it with the remaining fuel. As I was coming up on the airport, I feel the engine splutter, but it was still going. Heading in, it started sputtering more. So much so that I genuinely thought I'd run out mere meters from my destination. As I pulled through the boom gate for rental returns, I pulled my foot down and got a final burst of acceleration. The car determined to be the little engine that could, my finish line in sight, and the car is going to make it. Until it didn't. The car stalled. With the momentum I had, I pulled it into a spot marked Avis. It only made it about halfway in, and I tried in vain to restart it, but it wasn't to be. I got out and pushed the little engine that could into bay 109. I was 11 bays short of the first marked Hertz and was a broken man. My goal so near yet so far. Torment ran through my mind. Did those 11 bays mean I was short of my goal to bring it back empty? I mean, it was in a rental car park after all, and it wasn't uncommon for people to just park in a spot and ignore who owns a spot. I walk into the terminal, carry-on roller bay in one hand, car keys in the other, and walk up to the rental returns. "Can I help you?" The same young woman asks as I walk up to her, and I say, "Returning a car." She takes the paperwork and asks where I have parked it, and I say Bay 109. It says Avis. I respond. Her not looking up, she shrugs and talks into the radio on the counter, "Return 109. Finally, she says, "Did you fill it up?" I say no, and she asks roughly how much is left. "None." I say, "Oh, so the petrol light is on? No worries." She says, "No," I say. "I mean, it ran out of fuel as I drove in. I had to push it into the parking spot." The helpful woman gives me a blank stare for a full 10 seconds. "Wait, you let it run out? Well, you said return it empty, so I accepted your challenge. Seems I win," I said with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. The staff member turns to her colleague, points at me and says, "Prepaid fuel," and he says it ran out in the car park. The guy looks at me with a smirk and says, "Really? Well, it wouldn't start back up." I reply as someone comes in from outside to get the keys. "It's out of fuel." The woman says, "That's okay, I'll run it up to Shell after I've washed it." He replies. Both terminal staff look at him as a woman, looking at me, says, "No, the customer says he had to push it into the spot." Cue the largest eyes I've ever seen. I have to see this. He walks out with me and the guy from behind the counter, following behind. Opens the car and tries to start it. It's cranking but won't turn over as all 3 of us burst out laughing. "I've never had one fully out before," he says when I tell him the woman in there told me to bring it back empty, as I walk inside, laughing to check my bags. This happened a year or two ago. I had just returned from a long mission for my company in Indonesia. As soon as I could finish the paperwork, I could go on leave. I had about 3 days of report writing left to do. I had been invited to a nonsense meeting on a company ethos, which I had declined. The HR underling sent an email saying it was obligatory, which I ignored. Anyway, the meeting started without me. Then the HR person came out and said I had to attend. PowerPoint displays went on and on. Company ethos, other stuff, and then HR. What to do if you are offered the bribed? Which made me smile anyway. What's funny? The HR says. Oh, nothing.
No, go on.
So I asked her if we were supposed to offer incentives in order to complete missions.
Never, if you remember the PowerPoint we just worked through.
So I quickly copy-pasted the section of my WhatsApp conversation with a missions officer about 4 levels above HR underling and sent it to HR underling's email. I tell her, I just sent you something. She opened it and began to read. The missions manager was a sound guy who understands that in some countries, a little cash is the only way to make things function. Anyway, the email stated the case. I had hired a car, but I didn't have access to a driver all the time, and I was stuck in a hotel all weekend. Theoretically, you can use your home driving license to obtain an Indonesian driving license, and it should be straightforward. In reality, they see it as an opportunity to make some money and will happily make you wait a year and do a driving test. Unless you give a fat wad of banknotes in an envelope. About $130, but it's a lot to them. The manager said fine. I asked him how can I put it through expenses. Team building exercise, make a fake receipt. He says to me, which I did. 4 steak dinners with wine and loads of beer. I printed it out, screwed it up, and then scanned it. It looked legit. The manager wrote, looks good to me. Approved. She was reading this on her laptop, but it was shared with a 70-inch screen behind her. She looked up and everyone was practically smiling. Okay, we will break for coffee. She says, I didn't come back. She didn't come looking for me. And I went on vacation 2 days later. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.